What's up, Badger fans? Let's talk some stock up after the Minnesota game, plus get into your thoughts. Am I crazy about the running back room? Biggest offseason needs. Let's talk about it on today's Locked On Badgers. Let's go.
You are Locked On Badgers, your daily podcast on the Wisconsin Badgers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, Badger fans? Welcome to Locked On Badgers, your team every single day. For all the everydayers out there, thank you for making this one of your first listens. I really do appreciate it. I'm your host, Ryan Harings, and let's talk about it. Today's episode brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app. Create an account. Use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Get great ticket prices at Game Time. All right, let's start with this. I want to start with stock up because I'm still feeling the buzz of the Minnesota game, the Minnesota victory, right? The getting the axe back. And I want to just continue talking about some stock up players from that game. I'm going to start with, this isn't even a player. I'm going to start with Coach Fickell. Stock up. Now, it's not stock up from where we started the year to now. Like, that's stock down, if we're being honest, right? We expected more this year. Fair or not, they expected more, right? They talked about championships. They didn't talk about 7 and 5. But from where we were a couple weeks ago, from where we were before Saturday's game, it's stock up Coach Fickell. Like, you beat Minnesota, something that we had failed to do the previous couple years. You got the axe back. It's the biggest rivalry of the year, and you won by 2 touchdowns. And quite frankly, you could have punched another one in at the end if you wanted to. Stock up Coach Fickell. Also, stock up for embracing the rivalry, right? And by the way, if you're listening on the podcast, if you hear the crackling, that is a real fire in the background. We got some crackling going on here. But, in the locker room after the game, Coach Fickell talked about sinking the boat. Like, you got to love a coach that embraces the rivalry, because rivalries are fun. They're supposed to be fun. Don't ignore them. Don't pretend like they don't exist, like they don't mean more. I loved it. So, stock up Coach Fickell. Really good game overall. We out-physicaled Minnesota, beat them up in the second half. Clearly the better team. And a road win in the Big Ten against a team who really needed it. So, all the way around, stock up Coach Fickell. Stock up Braelon Allen, right? I mean, listen, you're talking about I think he's gone. I've talked about that all year. I think Braelon Allen's gone. We're going to get into a comment addressing that coming up on the show. But I think he's done everything he needs to do this year. I don't think he's coming back. I don't think he's ever wanted to come back. This has always been his plan. And to go out with that gritty game against Nebraska, and then to have this game, right? To have a game where against your rival, you put up almost 200 combined yards. He was the best player in the field. 26 carries. That's the type of workhorse effort that we've been asking for, that we've needed from Braelon Allen. We needed him to kind of take the team, put it on his back, and push forward. And he did that. 26 carries, 165 yards, 6.3 per carry, 2 touchdowns. He also had 3 receptions for 27 yards. Again, he almost had 200 yards from scrimmage. Best player in the field. Stock up majorly Braelon Allen, especially from where we were 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago. This was a huge game. This was kind of putting the cherry on the top of Braelon Allen's career at Wisconsin. And if you're going to go out beating Minnesota, go out dominating Minnesota, go out being the best player on the field in a game to reclaim the axe. Hats off, Braelon Allen. Let's go. Stock up offensive line. How many times this year have we talked about Jack Nelson penalties, false starts, holding calls, bad snaps, pass protection issue? It was pretty clean. I don't remember a penalty on the offensive line. Correct me if I'm wrong. I don't, certainly not one from Jack Nelson like that. That was impressive. And then Braelon Allen had some real holes to run through. They did a great job. For the most part, we didn't see any of the egregiously bad snaps that Tanner Bortolini's had for a lot of this year. Pass protection was super clean. You can compare and contrast to what Wisconsin's defensive line was able to do to Ethan Kalikamakis. I will never be able to pronounce that name correctly. But he got hit all game. I mean, our pass rush isn't that good, right? Minnesota's offensive line was atrocious. Meanwhile, Wisconsin kept Mordecai upright, kept him clean, gave him the time to kind of scan the field on some of those throws. Stock up offensive line. That's maybe the best performance of the year. And again, this is not a great Minnesota team, but this has also been an inconsistent offensive line group. So to go out and put up about 200 yards of rushing to keep your quarterback upright, to have no procedural penalties, which you've had all year, it's a good way for the offensive line to close out a disappointing regular season. Again, none of this is changing the narrative that this year wasn't what we hoped for. It wasn't the year anybody hoped for, but it's still a great. I mean, it's as good a way to end it as you could. So stock up offensive line, stock up Rico Hallman. I think he started the year really strongly. Had a few struggles, kind of middle of the season, but picked up his 6th interception. What a way to cap off a really good year for Ricardo Hallman, who's already he's gonna play a major part in next year's secondary as well. So stock up Ricardo Hallman and stock up Atticus Bertrams. We talked about Bertrams a lot this year, and usually it's been a little bit right? Like a little frustration here and there where we seemingly always run the wrong end of the punting game. Now, some of that is because some of the punters we played, like Iowa's punter is ridiculous. Like he's really good. But Bertram struggled at times this year. But in this game, 6 punts, averaged 40 yards per punt, down 3 inside the 20. And most importantly, in a game where it was a little windy, but it was kind of snowy, it was cold. Hit the punt 6 times. There was no shanks. There was no real bad punts. There was no mishandled anything. Like he did his job. And I think we need to acknowledge the fact that field position was a big part of our win against Minnesota. And that's a spot where Wisconsin has not always done well this year. They've struggled in those areas. So stock up Atticus Bertrams, stock up Rico Hallman, the offensive line. Specifically, let's call out Jack Nelson. Nelson had a good game. Riley Mahlman had a good game, especially as a run blocker. Like it was a really solid offensive line game. It reminded you a little bit of old school Wisconsin. Like they couldn't handle Braelon Allen, running for almost 200 yards, controlling the clock. Breaking off some big runs up the gut. The formations look differently, but it looked kind of like old Wisconsin. The offensive line has played a big part in that, obviously. Stock up Braelon Allen and stock up Coach Fickell, the coaching staff. Solid game plan. He still started behind, but I think overall that's kind of my stock up group. Let me know if you had anyone else stock up. I thought about Cade Yektemelli too, stepping in. Certainly having to fill a role with Aker out, with Malusi out. I thought he looked solid. Both the tight ends made some plays. I would say Jordan Turner as well, if I'm going to throw one more in there. That punch-out fumble, one of the biggest defensive plays of the game. That was really the last bit of hope that Minnesota had, that catch over the middle, Daniel Jackson. They still had some time in the game to make a late push. Jordan Turner hustling, coming up from behind, punching that ball out. That's really one of the plays of the game. That really, in my opinion, closed the door. So stock up Jordan Turner just made me based on that one play as well. All right, coming up, we're going to talk about offseason needs. Am I crazy for my take on the running back room? Talk about if we would have won these games with Braden Locke if he had been starting like we had hoped he would. We're like, I had thought he should have. We're going to talk about that next on Locked On Badgers. But first, a quick break for friends of the show over at Game Time. Game Time is the absolute best place to go buy any ticket you need for concert, sports, theater, whatever it is. Go to Game Time because you don't have to plan months in advance. You get cheaper tickets. It's the easiest ticket buying process available in the marketplace. That's why they're the fastest growing ticket platform in North America, because it's quick, it's easy. This is all people want, by the way. They want quick, they want easy, they want cheap. Game Time checks every one of those boxes. That's why I use it. You get pictures of the seats before you buy the ticket, so you know exactly what your view is going to look like. There's no surprises. You get last minute flash sales, and you don't have to plan months in advance. Plus, again, it's there for everything. It's not just a sports thing. Like so many other platforms are very specific. Whatever you want, you can buy those tickets on Game Time. Right now, go snag the tickets without the stress with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Again, that's download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. You are not going to regret it. It's the fastest, simplest, easy way to buy tickets, Game Time. All right, let's keep going here. Let's continue talking about some of your content, some of your comments, some of your thoughts. I wanted to make a big kind of wrap-up show, get a lot of your thoughts into this one, because this was a huge win. It was a huge win for a lot of people. But comments kind of ranged all over the board from, the season still kind of bad to, yeah, okay, we got the axe, to focusing on next year. I want to just get into some of them. So let's start here. I think this is going from Bucky63 because we didn't really talk about this. I shouldn't even say we didn't really. We definitely did talk about this. Bucky63 said, 45-minute show, not a whiff about the volleyball team beating Nebraska, who was undefeated. That's a great call, Bucky63. Thank you for writing in. So let's talk about it. Wisconsin is a volleyball school. Wisconsin is a women's hockey school, men's hockey school. Wisconsin is a dominant volleyball school. So Nebraska came in 27-0, undefeated, got swept in Madison, sent back to Nebraska, sent back to Omaha, tails between their legs. What an impressive performance. And Wisconsin pretty clearly was the best team there. So, yeah, hats off to the ladies, the women's volleyball team, continuing an incredibly impressive season. They came into that match 5th in the country. They're certainly going to raise up from there. Nebraska was number 1. Those are the two. They're probably going to meet again. Right? Those two teams are dominant. Obviously, Nebraska won in Omaha. We won in Madison, or Lincoln. I'm sorry. Nebraska won in Lincoln. We won in Madison. So, yeah, great. Hats off to the ladies. Heck of a performance. Swept Nebraska. Let's go. Let's get into another comment here from Bucky63. Tanner missed a lot, but most of the receivers could not get separation either. Other than Pauling, the receivers mostly sucked. So you're kind of hitting on something I think I've talked about a lot of the year. It's not all on Tanner. It's not all on the receivers. It's not all on the offensive line. It's not all on Phil Longo. It all has to get better. It all has to get better, right? And we've talked about this. None of it was good enough this year. You certainly didn't have receivers. Oftentimes you look down the field and there were receivers open, but other times you look and everybody's just Velcroed to defensive backs. And, who's Tanner supposed to throw to? So other plays Tanner wouldn't throw it. Like he would have a guy open, but maybe that's because he's not always ready to throw right away because he isn't seeing separation consistently. So that's causing him to kind of second guess or double clutch his throws. The bigger point is the whole offensive ecosystem, the whole passing game needs to get better. They need to upgrade at receiver 100%. If you guys remember, we had a guy on in the offseason who talked about this Badgers receiver group. He's an outsider. He's a draft guy, John Vogel. And he talked about this receiver group, and we were all really high on it. And he said, yeah, it's good for Wisconsin, but it's nowhere near as good as Ohio State's or the best teams in the country. Like, it has to get so much better. And it's true. We had Brian Smith on the Recruiting Insider. One of the most insightful things I thought he said is you can get the best quarterback here. And he mentioned, let's say Matt Toyer hits his ceiling. Maybe Matt Toyer hits his ceiling. He said, you're not going to do him. He's not going to look as good at Wisconsin as he is in the NFL because he's not going to have the receiver talent in Madison. Like, they have to fix that. The receivers have to get better. So a lot of people look at the quarterback. They look at, maybe he's got to throw it quicker. He's got to be more decisive. He had, 5 touchdowns this year, 6. All of that is true. None of that is good enough. But, man, the receivers have to get better. Because you look at the guys they brought in, Bryson Green didn't play to the level that we'd hoped. Chimere Dike had a disappointing year. C.J. Williams was kind of a non-factor. Skyler Bell had too many drops. Just about every receiver this year, outside of Pauling, just about every receiver this year disappointed or just barely lived up to expectations. That's not good enough. How many of these receivers would be in the 2 deep at Ohio State? Maybe just Pauling. And let's be honest, probably not even Pauling, right? Not at Ohio State, so the talent level at that spot specifically, we talk about quarterback all the time, but the receiving spot, that's why I said that's one of I mentioned 4 spots in the portal. Receivers on my list. Like, you have to keep getting bodies in here until you find a guy. And I think it should be a little better next year. You'll have Pauling back. Hopefully CJ takes a step. Bryson Green can come back. I think Tretch could play next year. I've liked what I've seen from Quincy Burrows and Vinny Anthony, but you got to get more talent there. The receivers have to win more than they have, and they have to make the job of the quarterbacks easier. And that's not even to mention the multitude of drops that we talked about this year. The receivers weren't good enough this year, and Bucky's completely right. Tanner gets more of the blame for that, but the receivers weren't good enough either. So that's a good point. Bob Milborn says we need to get a linebacker who can cover a receiver. Yeah, it's a huge hole in this defense. You can see it when you're playing Turner, Muma, Getz, Peterson. None of those guys are fluid in coverage. None of them. The best defenses have a couple of those linebackers who can rush the passer, who can drop out into like a little hook zone, who can cover a receiver on an arrow route or a wheel route, who can cover a tight end, who can stretch the seam down and run with them with 4.6 speed and go up and contest a pass. Who of our guys can do that? Now, I think Christian Allegro can, right? We didn't see it a lot, but he has the athletic tools to do it. If you're looking at the depth chart, I think Tyler Jancy could be a guy athletically who can do it. We got to see it. Anele Lafele is coming in. He's not going to be that guy. Like, he's going to be more just put, north and south, put the hand in the dirt. And I think he's athletic enough, but I don't think he's necessarily going to be great in open space. Heiberger in a couple of years could be that guy, but there's a hole there. There's a hole there on this defense with the linebacker group, and teams have exploited us with it. You've seen teams exploit us with it. So they got to either internally develop guys to do that, or it's going to have to be a guy they bring in the portal. And that's difficult to do because finding linebackers that can do that, that can play downhill and also cover, those are NFL guys. And those guys are hard to find in the portal. So I agree, Bob. It is absolutely a spot they need to figure out. They need to find some guys who can fill that role, but it's hard to do. I think on the current roster, I think Allegro's a guy that can do it. I think Heiberger, whether or not he's going to be ready next year, I think he's a guy that could potentially do it. If we're looking at this recruiting class, Raphael Dunn is that 6'4", kind of 210-pound werewolf. He could play all over the field. He could end up being a safety, a linebacker. He's the type of hybrid athlete that when you start pairing him with a Heiberger and an Allegro, you start to get a lot of length and versatility on the field. So he could be a guy that does it as well, potentially. But now we're counting on true freshmen, and that's really difficult to do. So it's not going to all get fixed right away is my bigger point. Badger Pat says, Locke is the smartest guy in the room and has a good arm. I can't believe we were starting to bail on him because of his inexperience. By the end of the summer, he will be really good. Let me take a quick drink here. Sorry. Yeah, no, he could definitely be really good, Badger Pat. And I don't think I'm bailing on him. I'm just saying my bigger point is I don't think he has the ceiling that some other players may have. And I don't think we saw enough to say we don't need to go get more help at the quarterback spot. That's all I'm saying. He could still be the guy. Like I like a lot of things about Locke. I think he has moxie. I think he'll stand in there and take a hit. I think he's generally pretty accurate. He knows the offense. He's solid between the ears. That's the most important part of playing quarterback anyway. He comes from a high level of Texas football. He's a 4-star guy. He was recruited by Mike Leach. Like I like so much about Braelon Locke, but at the end of the day, he had a bit of an audition. It wasn't a fair audition. Like he was thrown in the middle of a season, having to play in Iowa and Ohio State and some really tough teams. So but he had a bit of an audition, and he didn't take the bull by the horns. And that's kind of how this sport works. When you get your shot, whether it's fair or not, if you don't take the bull by the horns, teams are going to keep looking for. It's not to say they won't keep giving you a chance either, but they're going to keep looking for the answer until they find the answer. And I just don't know if we know Locke is the answer yet. So maybe he is. I've always said I cheer for all of them, right? Like whoever becomes the guy, I hope he absolutely crushes it. And if it's Locke, I hope he crushes it. He's got attributes of a successful quarterback, but he's always going to be a little limited because he's not the biggest and he's not the fastest. And if you're a 6-foot quarterback that doesn't have great mobility, boy, you better be elite with the arm. It is. Or with the decision making, right? You have to be elite at those other things. You have to be like Brock Purdy. You have to be just so good with the anticipatory throws, so good with the touch. And I'm not sure if Locke is that guy. I'm not saying he's not, but we need to see. So I hope he is by the end of summer. Like you said, he'll be really good. That'd be amazing for the Badgers. I'm definitely not out on Locke. I'll say that. But I am in on we need more competition in the quarterback room and let the best player rise to the top. That's where I'm at. Marty says, I love that Fickell said their goal was to sink the boat in the post-game locker room. I agree. I mentioned this in the first segment, Marty. I 100% agree. I love a coach who embraces the rivalry. Right? Like hate Minnesota, right? You want to endear yourself to Badger fans. You want to generate more excitement. Talk some crap about PJ Fleck and the Gophers. I'm all about it. That's what rivalries are about. And there's so many coaches who don't embrace it, who want to play nice to the other team. I'm not saying like start petty nonsense, but it's the X. It's Minnesota. Like, the heck with them. Yeah, sink the boat. Way to go, Fickell. Sorry. Way to go, Fickell. I absolutely love that. Will Hanna says, we would lose both the games if Locke would have started. So talking about the Nebraska and the Minnesota game. I think you're probably right. Well, I mean, it's impossible to say. I would have liked to have seen Locke get some more reps against lesser competition. You remember, a lot of his reps came against Ohio State. They came against Iowa. He also played Illinois, obviously. Yeah, I think you're probably right, though. Those two games specifically, really both of them, specifically Nebraska. Mordecai, with his legs and his just composure, gave Nebraska fits. And I don't know if you would have expected Braelon Locke to be better in those moments. Also did a great job taking care of the ball. Outside of the halftime kind of Hail Mary interception, Tanner Mordecai did an excellent job protecting the football, not fumbling, not making dumb decisions, not putting his team in a bad spot. So in that sense, maybe that was the perfect quarterback to finish out the year. And in that sense, I was probably wrong. Like I wanted Braelon Locke, but it's hard to argue with the fact that Tanner Mordecai went 2-0 down the stretch, right? Like I get things wrong, and certainly Certainly, Braden Locke's not doing better than 2-0 down the stretch. So, yeah, the coaching staff was probably right on that one. And you got to respect, like I said, we've talked about some of the inconsistency with the throwing game in relation to Mordecai, but you got to respect the guts. You got to respect the legs. You got to respect the will to win. And he brings all of those to the table. So, hats off to Mordecai. All right, we're going to take a quick break for friends of the show. Come back, talk about Nick Evers a little bit. Plus, we're going to talk about where do we need the most help in this team. All that coming up on Locked On Badgers. But first, a quick break for our friends of the show over at FanDuel. And listen, as the weather gets colder, football continues to roll along. The NFL offers stay hot on FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 back if your team wins. That's incredible. So if you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to do it. There's no better time to get into the action. And again, I've talked about FanDuel. This is the perfect betting app with your parlays, futures, teasers, everything you want. You want to just do simple money line bets. It's all there, from the simplest to the most complex 17-team parlays that you can put together, and that I often do to try to hit it big. I love the parlays. I love the teasers. It's all there on FanDuel. You know, I still have my futures bet on the Niners winning a Super Bowl. Brock, Joe Montana, Purdy is going to get us there. I have faith. My son's bet's looking a little iffy because apparently Bradley Beal has the back of an 87-year-old shopkeeper. Doggone it. But that being said, I still do it all on FanDuel. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. Kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, the official partner of the NFL. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. Kick off the NFL season. Again, FanDuel is the official betting partner of the NFL, and they have that great $150 free bets if your money line hits. Go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. You will not regret it. Let's keep going here. Again, this show is mostly just your comments because we're all kind of riding that Minnesota high, but we all have questions about the future. We all have frustrations. And I think this is a great time to get together and just kind of talk about them, chop them up. So this is the next one here. I forget who this is from, but he said, I'm so sick of people talking about Evers. He couldn't beat out Marshall Howe, Miles Burkett. He is absolutely terrible. That doesn't magically fix itself because of tools. What's between your ears is the most important. So let me start with the last part there. What's between your ears is the most important as a quarterback. That is true. I 100% agree. As far as I'm so sick of people talking about Evers, people are always going to talk about the guy that's the biggest, fastest with the strongest arm. It's no different in any other sport, right? If you look at the NBA draft leading up to it, people are going to be talking about the wing with a 41-inch vertical. Like, because fans, I shouldn't say we always, but typically fans are looking at the upside. What if this guy hits? It's the same thing in minor league baseball. You'll have a lefty who throws 91 to 93 with great control, and fans are going to be excited about the righty who throws 97 but can't find the strike zone because they're like, well, what if he hits? And he probably won't. But that's why fans talk about Evers. I get that you're sick of it, but he's going to keep getting talked about because he's going to keep running a 4.5 with a cannon R, and he's 6'4". I've talked about him a lot. Again, I find it frustrating that we can't find a package for him. I've said that a lot. In times where our offense has struggled, he might be the best athlete we could put out on there on the field. It frustrates me a little bit that we can't find any type of package there. But again, I'm not at practice. Maybe they've tried it. It hasn't worked. But they're going to keep talking about him. He's got one more offseason. Listen, if he doesn't make a move this offseason, though, going into next year, that will be it for Nick Evers. I already don't really think he's going to play at Wisconsin. You look at the depth chart. You look at who's ahead of him, who's past him. You look at who's coming. Like, if he doesn't make a move really quick, he's not going to climb this depth chart for whatever reason, right? Whether it's the scheme doesn't fit him, whether he can't pick it up, whatever it is, he better make a move quick. But people are going to keep talking about him because he's an athletic freak show, and those are the guys that can level the playing field against the teams with more talent, right? You have to hit on one of those guys because Ohio State gets those guys a lot. Georgia gets those guys. J.J. McCarthy's that type of guy at Michigan. So people are going to keep talking about him. Keffel says, good win. I predicted 7-5 in August, and that's what happened. Largely a disappointing season. The level of play was low. Still, they kept the bowl streak alive. 100% agree with all this. I certainly didn't predict 7-5, but I agree with the rest of what Keffel said here. He has been more realistic on this team, so hat tip there. I agree it was a disappointing season. I absolutely agree. And, the last 2 weeks have been wins, and we've been excited about that. But in the larger scheme of the season, yeah, it's been a disappointing year, 100%. But Keffel was also dead on. It kept the bowl streak alive. That's not trivial to me. It's the third longest active bowl streak in college football. That means something. those bowl practices mean something. Going to a bowl game means something. Having a winning year means something. So agree with just about everything that Kepo says here. He was basically dead on with his predictions for this team. I was way too high. Commandant says we could use help at every position, but I would not count on the portal for much help. Just look at last year. Yeah, it's true. How many of those portal guys we were really excited about made a big impact this year? Not enough of them. Now, you still got to go mining, right? You still have to go try to plug holes because the portal's there and other teams are going to do it. But you have to. And Commandant went on to say this team is going to be built through recruiting. That's what Luke Fickell has also said. That's what the recruiting department has said. And it has to be, because you're not at the toughest positions. You're not going to find enough answers on the defensive line in the transfer portal. You're just not. Those guys are too hard to find. And the really good ones that hit that market are too expensive. I'm just saying they are just too difficult to get at Wisconsin. So you have to hit them in recruiting. You have to bring in 3 to 4 guys every cycle until you build enough depth there where you have a 2 deep that you're excited and feel good about. So they're going to have to do a better job there. I agree with Commandant. They need help at a lot of spots, and the portal may not be the magic bullet for it all, but you got to try. Like, you have to continue looking in the portal to try to find solutions while you rebuild the depth through the recruiting. Lord Croy says, Ryan, you're nuts. If you think what we need at running back, if you think we have what we need at running back, we need someone with more shiftiness and quickness. Aker and Yakimelli should be fullbacks. So, I mean, I guess what I'm saying is I think I don't think Aker and Yakimelli are your 1 and 2. And maybe I wasn't very articulate on that. I think with the 3 guys coming in, plus Aker, Yakimelli, White, and I think Malusi's coming back. And again, I preface that by saying I think Malusi's coming back. I think that's enough at running back, because I really like the 3 freshmen coming in. And running back is a spot that freshmen can typically, it's not as big of a curve to step in and play right away. So that's where I think if those 3 are coming back and Ches is here, how many running backs do you need on a roster? I didn't think Aker and Yakimelli look bad this year. They're not 1A guys, but they can play. If Aker and Yakimelli are your 4 and 5 or your 3 and 4, and Ches is one of your top guys, and Dylan Jones is maybe your other guy, and Dupree's getting in there, I think that's fine. I really do. Now, if Ches doesn't come back, I think then you probably go maybe find somebody in the portal. I don't think it's that bad with the 3 guys coming in, I guess, but we'll see. Another one from Tim. He said, you guys seriously like Aker as our guy next year? He's a fullback. He says, that's crazy. Again, I'm not saying he's our guy. I'm saying I thought he looked fine as a guy you can play, right? If he's your 3rd guy, that's fine. I truly believe that. He can catch the ball. He's physical. He has burst. I mean, what is he at? Was he averaging on the year this year? I don't actually know. I bet you it's around 4 yards a carry. Hold on. I'm going to look it up right now. Jackson Aker. Let's see. Yeah, 4.1 yards per carry. If that's your 3rd guy, he's going to get better. Like, he's going to get better. He's still transitioning to be that halfback. I think that you're right though, Tim. Like, if he's the guy next year, that's a problem. If he's your 3rd guy and Ches and Dylan Jones or Ches and Dupree, or if he's in a timeshare at your 3rd spot with Dupree and Dylan Jones is your 2, I think that's fine. I really do. I asked about biggest needs next year. Ari Devine in our live show just said pass rush. I think this is, and he capitalized it. Ari, I think you are dead on. This is 100% accurate. This team will not do any real damage until that front 7 is upgraded. 100%, full stop, period. Turn in the assignment. That's it. That is all stop, the biggest priority, bar none. That front 7 has to be upgraded. It has to get so much more disruptive. We can't go into another year where we are unable to impact the comfortable level of a quarterback, opposing quarterback. We couldn't get disruptions. We couldn't get hits. We couldn't keep them in the pocket. We struggled against the run. We have to upgrade the front 7, specifically the defensive line. It has to get so much better. I agree with this completely, Ari. I think there were some bright spots. I think James Thompson early in the year. I think Barton down the stretch. They need like 4 more guys to step up. And one of those guys could be Jamel Howard. I hope so. The freshman from last year's class. Maybe Dylan Johnson can play right away. That's a big task for a true freshman, but he carries the weight well. He's a wrestler. That spot has to get so much better, though. I 100% agree. Hooger says Dylan is going to be a dog. Yeah, Dylan Jones is going to be really good. I agree there. Let's see. This is from Mike. He said DeCluna, Ogard, and Holman are our cornerbacks next year. Yeah, I think O'Malley's going to play. And I think Hallman's certainly in there. I hope Snowden can find a role somewhere because I think he's physically uniquely talented. I think Chase Arnold is going to potentially find a role too because he is a 4-3 guy. Maybe as like a slot corner, Chase Arnold can really, really, really run, and that speed is needed on this defense. So I think he could find a role. And it wouldn't shock me if a guy like Nizer Forkrin isn't that too deep as well. I thought he showed flashes this year. I think there's enough there that he could be a valuable piece going into next season. Last question here. This is from Connor. Here's what makes me nervous. If Fleck gets let go, if he's on the hot seat, I don't want this to happen, but do you think Jim Leonard would get a look at Minnesota? Would he take that job to get on? Jim Leonard, I don't think would ever take the Minnesota job. I think he cares too much about Wisconsin. I would be stunned if that ever happened. So hope I'm wrong on that, but I could never see that happening. Anyway, that is the show today. I wanted to get a bunch of your comments in. Thank you again for tuning in. For all the everydayers, thank you so much for tuning in to Locked On Badgers. If you want to go join our subtext, that's kind of just a unique way that we can do a few more things with this community. You get some more one-on-one conversations with me. There's some unique content coming up and that we already kind of put out on there. Plus, it's a way if you want to support the show. It's $5 a month. There is a free trial. So if you don't like it, you can jump out it whenever you want. No pressure. But the subtext is a way to kind of support the show if that's something you're interested in doing. Anyway, on Wisconsin, thank you all for joining in. I really do appreciate it. A bunch more content coming up this week on Wisconsin, and we'll talk later.